So to begin, inshallah, so Ustad Mustafa, he focused on internal factors, and I'm going to focus on external factors, which will, to some degree, relate to internal, because the external influences the internal. And the first point that I will touch upon, although I wasn't planning to touch upon it firstly, is the issue of culture. So I will ask a question and you tell me your opinions. Some of the fuqaha, they say that the Arab should not marry a non-Arab. What's your opinion on that? Put your hand up, of course. Please don't what's your opinion? No, without elaboration. You read in a book, the faqih says that it's not recommended that the Arab marries the non-Arab. Likewise, from that you can take it's not recommended that the non-Arab marries an Arab, for example. So what's your opinion? No, but keep it brief. Wrong, right? Okay, put your hand up if you think it's wrong. Okay, put your hand up if you think it's right. No one's bold enough? No one's brave today, huh? No one thinks it's right? Okay. Huh? Yeah, إنما المؤمنون إخوة. Okay. What about if I say to you, I don't recommend that you do business with this man, but he's a Muslim? Okay, so doesn't the same rule apply to this statement here? Depends on the reason. Huh? Yeah, but then I did elaborate, but you said it's wrong. Khalas, no elaboration. It must be wrong. So there's multiple ways. Okay, so now the fuqaha, they're from the ulama of Islam, right? Ulama of Islam. If we say that the ulama have issues, then we have issues with the deen that's reached us. That's the reality of the matter. Why? Because the deen reached us through who? The ulama. So now if you have in the book of an alim, it's not recommended that the Arab marries a non-Arab, are we going to say that that's a big problem? What should we first assume? This man is an alim. There must be a valid reason for this statement. So then the next question should be, what's the reason? Today, what will we conclude? This is racism. That's the conclusion. This alim must be a racist. Throw his works out. Right? So now let's elaborate. You have various communities that are Muslims, right or wrong. Some of those communities, the head of the household is who? The man. Other communities, the head of the household is who? The woman. Is that a reality or not? It's a reality. What happens when you have two individuals coming from two cultures who get married? One, the man is the head of the household. The other, the woman is the head of the household. What's going to happen in the house? There's going to be a clash. So, can you say that it's better that they don't get married to each other? In that context, the fuqaha, when they speak about this issue, they're speaking about culture. They're speaking about culture. Culture plays a major role in marriage. A major role. And we like to assume ourselves in the West, we like to assume ourselves multicultural. You know, to an arrogant degree, where we believe that we are open and we can tolerate and we can accept any cultural practice. And that's not the case. It's not the case. A person may say though, but what about Islam? How can we take culture into consideration? We have Islam. Islam sets the boundaries. The man is like this, the woman is like that. Is that the case? As I mentioned earlier, there is a principle in Islam, al-urfu muhakkama. Yeah, that customs are given a legislative station. As long as the custom does not go against a clear-cut prohibition in Islam. So as an example, if it's customary in a country to have a glass of wine with every meal, I cannot drink the wine and say this is a custom. I don't want to be rude to the people. No, why? Drinking alcohol is haram. But if it's a custom in a country that spitting is considered inappropriate in public spaces, then it becomes inappropriate for me to spit in public spaces. Even though in other places it might not be considered inappropriate. In some customs, in some cultures, in some languages, there is no such thing as please and thank you. You don't say, please, may I have some water? You say, give me some water. Reality. It's true. Now, imagine you have a man who comes from this particular culture. There's no please and thank you in his language. And you have a woman, everything has a please and a thank you. And the man says, wife, get me some water. What's the woman going to say? Do I look like your servant or your slave? And reverse the role. The man says, or the woman says to the man, she comes from a culture where there's no please or thank you. The woman says to the man, water. He's going to say, woman, divorce. This is what's happening in marriages. Maybe it's amusing, but it's a summary of what's happening in various ways. In some cultures, the man doesn't interfere in the kitchen. It's considered aib. If the man tries to go into the kitchen, the women in his household will take it as offensive. This exists. I know women like that. And in other cultures, the men, they cook and they clean, and it's not considered to be a aib, a shame, a blameworthy thing. So now, which culture do you say is correct and incorrect? Did the Sharia say that the man shouldn't cook or clean? No. Did the Sharia say that the man should cook or clean? No. So which of the two do you say is correct here? Which of the two do you say is correct? One, Yeah, but so that's called tanazul. But that's you're meeting in the middle now. So, but when we talk, we have to talk about the masses, not about the individuals. We can't talk about individual cases. We have to talk about the general cases. And so the fuqaha, they understand that if there is a culture clash in the home, it's going to be problematic for the home. And so they suggest things to alleviate that potential risk. So when you have cultures, as the sister rightly said, if a man is raised in a home where he hasn't lifted a finger his entire life, when he goes into his new home and he has his wife, what's he going to expect? Not to lift a finger. And when a man comes from a home wherein his father has been cooking and cleaning alongside his mother, for example, or his mother has been working, or whatever the case may be, he's going to get married, and what's he going to expect? The same thing. And very few of us take into consideration the way that our understanding of marriage has been conditioned by the cultures from which we come from. And we assume, I'm born in the UK, raised in the UK, I came to the UK at an early age, this sister or this brother is the same, we can get married. It's not the case. I'm not saying that we shouldn't marry into cultures. No, we can, alhamdulillah. But if we do, there has to be a willingness to adapt. If there's no willingness to adapt, the marriage there can be problems in the marriage. Likewise, in some cultures, I spoke to an individual, and he said to me that when he was raised in his homeland, this is now his homeland, but his forefathers' homeland, I guess. The mother and the father, they don't really raise the child. The mother and the father don't really raise the child. The relationship between child and parent is similar to the relationship between student and teacher. It's the members of the household that tend to the child, perhaps maids and so on and so forth. The mother and the father, it's more respect, kiss on the forehead, respectful in front of them, etc. When that person comes now and he has his own family, taking his children to the park, changing his children's nappies, cooking and cleaning for his child, these things are going to be foreign to him. Why? Because he hasn't experienced that himself. And so that person requires a level of adaptability. They have to adapt. And if a woman comes from a different background and she has a husband like that, and she doesn't understand why he's like this, again, it's going to be a clash. I've seen cases of individuals, whether married or not married, where they're having major arguments because of a misunderstanding of communication. I'll give you an example that I use all the time. North Africans can be very expressive when they speak. They can be very expressive and passionate, whether Egyptian, Algerian, whatever the case. When they speak with each other, they can be very passionate and very use a very emotive language. But you have other cultures, for example, sometimes, for example, certain people from English culture, their methodology of speaking is a lot less expressive. It's not as emotive. It's not it's not normal to see two individuals expressing with each other at a loud volume. So now you have an individual who's coming from that emotive, highly expressive, loud culture, and they're speaking someone that comes from that soft, less emotive, less expressive culture. When they talk, it's very easy for a miscommunication or a misunderstanding of communication to take place because of the culture. Because of the culture. Gender roles in our time today, a big problem. It's a big issue where you're having arguments about gender roles. The fuqaha, specifically, the fuqaha will say that it is dependent upon the culture. The man can expect from his wife that which is the norms for a woman in the context, within the culture. Outside of the main duties, of course. And let me be blunt, one of the main duties of the woman is intimacy. That's one of the main duties of the woman, intimacy. Just as one of the main duties of the man is to put the bread on the table. There's no negotiations when it comes to putting bread on the table, so things like that. There should be no negotiations when it comes to intimacy. It doesn't mean that the man can demand that, no, but there has to be an intimate relationship present in the marriage, and it's considered oppressive of the woman to deny her husband intimacy. And that often causes problems in a marriage. Likewise, it's not up for negotiation for the man to provide for his wife. No, he has to do it. If he cannot do it, he needs to go out and find a way to do it. It's that simple. So outside of these areas, it's much to the culture. Intimacy, providing, that's not down to culture. That's legislated within Islam. How much is provided, and perhaps how much intimacy, yeah, that can be, I guess, somewhat related to the culture, the general kind of practices. How much does a man have to provide, and so on and so forth, beyond the house, the clothing, and the food, what type of food, etc. Again, culture, and that's not up for discussion. No one says, well, I only have to provide my wife a bowl of soup a day. Like, no one really says outrageous things like that. But as for everything else, the cooking, the cleaning, the child caring, so on and so forth, the fuqaha, they speak about the culture in these issues. And if you look within our communities, you have communities where the man is very hands-off. The woman is hands-on with everything. And you have cultures where the man is hands-on and the woman is also hands-on. I don't really think we have cultures where the woman is completely hands-off. But these cause major problems, a lack of understanding. And when we speak about gender roles, we cannot speak in black and whites. We cannot say men do this, women do that. It's oftentimes case to case, subjective. If you have, for example, two individuals that come from the same culture, Southeast Asian and Southeast Asian, then yes, the gender roles are defined. They should know what's expected of each other. Why? Because they come from the same culture, the same community. Likewise, you have two individuals that come from East Africa, North Africa, then it shouldn't really be much of a discussion. It shouldn't be up for debate. Why? Because they know what's expected of each other according to the culture based upon the homes that they come from. The issue arises when we have two individuals coming from two different cultures, or when you have individuals that may come from the same culture, but they've adopted views that are from outside the remits of their culture. Which leads me on to the second point, which I was going to mention as the first point. One of the biggest destructions, I believe, and Allahu A'lam, one of the biggest external destructions within marriages today, the internet. In fact, I would go so far as to suggest one of the most destructive mediums in existence today in various areas of life, the internet. Ustad Mustafa mentioned addiction to pornography, addiction to gambling, addiction to alcohol, addiction to drugs. All four of those and more, you don't need to leave your home to engage in now because of the phone. Pornography, you can view it, Wallahu al-musta'an, may Allah protect us, on the phones, the smart devices, TV, etc. Free access, no one's going to know, and so on and so forth. Alcohol, you don't have to leave your home. 10, 15 years ago, to buy alcohol, there was a risk that you would be seen purchasing alcohol. That would have prevented many. Today, touch a button, it comes to your house. The gambling, now gambling is as entertaining as it is to play a game on your phone. They design gambling apps to be entertaining like games. They even promote, and many parents don't realize, but they encourage and promote gambling in games that children are playing. Call of Duty, FIFA, Fortnite. These things are gateways to gambling. They are gateways to gambling. And they are designed to be as such. Likewise, someone might say, but you can't order drugs to your house. Of course you can. You can order drugs to your home too. Nowadays, someone can even order a gun to his house if he knows how and where to buy that gun using the internet, touch of a button. The internet is a destructive force. If not tamed and managed, it can destroy any man and destroy any woman. And I, unfortunately, have seen with my own two eyes, and I'm sure Ustad Mustafa can say the same, and I'm sure many here can say the same. But I have seen individuals who have destroyed themselves with the internet, especially with smartphones. These devices, we have to be very, very cautious and wary of these things. Imagine the fuqaha, the ulama previously, they said satellite TV should be considered haram. Satellite TV. This makes satellite TV look like an entertainment system for the righteous. It's the reality. We think back now and say, if only it was satellite TV. If you hear a man only has satellite TV and no smartphone, you say, Allahu Akbar, this man must be from the awliya. Because these things are so destructive. And it's not that they're destructive to one part of our community only. It's not like they only affect the youth. These devices have hooks for every type of person, every age of person, every language, every interest. Anything that you like, you will find your hook in this device. That's the reality. And we have to understand, if one man can fool, any man can fool. If one woman can trip, any woman can trip. There is no person that is safe. No person that is safe. Iblis has no prejudices. Iblis does not look for color or ethnicity or even religion when it comes to corruption of man. And so we have to be on guard. And these devices will destroy a marriage, and they will be silent in doing so. They will be silent in doing so. They will destroy a marriage, and the person won't even realize that it's happening. Some of the main ways that these devices destroy a marriage: Instagram, Snapchat, and I think The worst of all, TikTok. TikTok is destructive. Instagram, destructive. Snapchat, destructive. If I see something as a human, I have it within me naturally to compare myself to that which I see. It's a natural human instinct to compare. If we were left alone and we didn't know what was outside of our own four walls, we would find contentment with that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. But because we're always seeing individuals who are traveling, eating the nicest of foods, wearing the nicest of clothes, putting up, as we've seen some of these, and forgive me for speaking about others, but it should be said, some of these YouTube celebrity couples and Instagram couples, etc., smiling for the camera, acting like they're having a great time. But then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala lifts the veil for people to see the reality of these people's lives. Look at Hollywood, for example. Try to think of one Hollywood couple who have had a good marriage. Look at Will Smith and his wife. Look at Will Smith and his wife. Look at Brad Pitt and his wife. These individuals, it's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's hikmah, wallahu a'lam, that these individuals' marriages are destroyed and they're put on show for the destruction that they are. Why? Because these individuals are responsible for making people feel that their marriages are not working. Because these individuals paint a false idea of what love is, what a marriage is. You wake up in the morning and your wife's hair is perfectly combed, even though she's been sleeping for the last 8 hours or so. You wake up and you look fantastic. You come into the home and you're smiling and dancing with each other and everything's beautiful. Of course, marriage is not like that. Life is not like that. But these individuals, they paint this false picture. Likewise on Instagram. Do you think on Instagram someone is going to take a picture of themselves when they're having a bad time? Of course not. They're going to take a picture of themselves when everything looks fantastic, amazing, the best of images, picture perfect. But reality is half, if not most of these people that spend all of their time online are depressed. They have anxieties of various kinds. They see their self-worth in their online image. They don't have any worth outside of that particular remit. It's all false and fake. To the extent people hire clothes and shoes and cars and homes to take pictures for Instagram, which is a sad life to live. But they fool us. Likewise, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, they can lead to a person becoming addicted. An addiction, how does an addiction start? An addiction starts with a small taste. No person starts to smoke 20 cigarettes a day. No person starts with 20 cigarettes a day. If they did, they will become extremely sick. It starts with a cigarette, and then 2, and then a few more, and then a few more, until a person wakes up and finds himself in a place where they now need help. And likewise, other addictions. Pornography is a major problem, a major problem. And my apologies if there are young children present, but parents need to really understand the problem with this issue. And men are, in particular, more at risk to this than women. And I haven't heard, alhamdulillah, and I hope I don't hear, but it wouldn't surprise me to hear that there are women that are addicted to it too. But it's mostly men that I've come across and I've heard. And if a person is suffering with this, then they have to seek help. They have to seek help. But it's a major problem, and it can destroy a marriage and destroy a person's life. It has to be treated like a drug. These devices need to be treated like drugs. This is a digital drug. It has the same impact on the mind as a drug. It gives you a good feeling. And clinically, there's a condition. It's referred to as OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. Think about the way we use these phones. We are obsessive over them, and we are compulsive in the way that we check them. But we don't term it as a disorder. We've normalized it. We've normalized it to the extent that a person finds it problematic to leave the house without their phone. To the extent that we constantly check these devices to see if anything new has happened. Refreshing feeds and so on and so forth. What's that going to do? It's going to leave a person shallow and empty. It's going to leave a person shallow and empty. These devices will carve out our inners slowly and just leave a shell. and two shells cannot get along with each other. That's what's happening to marriages. Before, if you're sitting in a room with another person, you have to talk. Now you can what? Go online and talk to people that have really no relationship with you or not too important in that moment. Before, you would be forced to talk. You would be forced to develop interest, be forced to find something to entertain you and your wife and husband together, etc. Now you don't need to. So one of the biggest problems in marriages, and probably one that's not mentioned, these devices and social media in particular. If you would like a healthy marriage, think about getting rid of social media. Unless you have an inherent reason to be on social media, I would honestly advise you get rid of it, full stop. Get rid of it, full stop. Ask yourself a question. Does social media really benefit me in any way? What benefit do I get from it? The Prophet ﷺ, he said, "Min husni Islam al-mar'i tarkuhu ma la ya'ni." From the completeness of one's Islam is to leave off that which does not concern him. On social media, what am I doing? I'm consuming that which does not concern me. Consuming that which does not concern me. And there's a famous saying, you are what you eat. We are eating with our eyes from these devices. And there is a direct link from the eye that goes all the way to the heart. To consume a lot with the mouth is better than consume a lot with the eye. What you consume with your mouth goes to your stomach and it has an impact. But what you consume with your eye, directly to the heart. Directly to the heart. And it has an impact on the soul. So these devices are problematic. And if as parents, our children see us in the homes on our devices all the time like this, when they grow up, how can we tell them to put their devices away? We're teaching them. So the first point was the culture issue. It's not to say that we cannot marry and be intercultural. We can, but there has to be a level of adaptability and understanding my culture, understanding my expectations. Before I get into marriage, what do I expect from my wife? There's nothing wrong with that. The woman, what do I expect from my husband? There's nothing wrong with that. So that when I have a meeting, I can be clear. If I'm already married, I can find a middle ground between myself and my wife. Be clear. Rather than these issues being, as the brother mentioned, not addressed, and it leads to resentment. The third, and again, this one, and my apologies for anyone that finds anything I say offensive, but it has to be said. This one is as destructive as the others, but the social media is silently destructive. And this third one, in-laws. Bad in-laws. Bad in-laws will break a marriage. Bad in-laws will break a marriage. And why do I speak about bad in-laws? Because we are all in-laws to someone. There are some who, subhanAllah, it's as if they want their child to be divorced. The way that they act in their child's marriage, there's no other explanation that perhaps they don't want their child to be married. They are what's the word? Expecting of their in-law, whether man or woman, that which is unattainable. They are mistreating them. Sometimes you have in-laws that are being racist towards their in-laws. You have in-laws that are not allowing their in-law, i.e. their son or their daughter's spouse, to come to their home, refusing to see the children because they come from a woman or a man who they didn't agree with or don't like, etc. This is oppression, haram. And this is something which is a lot more common than we perhaps realize. Bad in-laws lead to a bad marriage. If I want the best for my son or daughter, I should realize that marriage and a healthy marriage is what is best for them. And if I become the person that leads to their breakup, on Yawm al-Qiyamah, I'm going to stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and be questioned. I'm going to be questioned. The fourth, which relates to the social media, and it relates to culture clashes, but it's more perhaps ideological. That is isms. Various types of isms. So the famous, you have feminism. The other, you could perhaps misogynism, materialism, various types of philosophical approaches that have become articulated to us through media that we consume, through discussions that we have. And if we want to be upright and good, sound Muslims, we have to make Islam the framework that we follow. I cannot be a Muslim and feminist, a Muslim and misogynistic, a Muslim and a materialist, a Muslim and a whatever other ism there is. It doesn't go hand in hand. Islam is its own ism. It is its own philosophy, its own framework. I have to understand, what does Allah want from me and how can I fulfill those roles? And this is a very important point. I have to question myself. I have to introspect. I have to be introspective. And you have many individuals have been mistreated historically, i.e. in their experience, by women, so they become misogynistic. They develop an affinity with the so-called red pill movement. And you have many women who have been mistreated by men historically, whether it's they've seen their mothers being mistreated, their sisters being mistreated, or they've been mistreated themselves, and they develop an affinity with feminists. And they start to adopt feminist views and tendencies. We have to understand who we're listening to and what agendas they are following and pushing. Every single one of us, we have a philosophy that drives us. We are a purpose-driven creature, man. We all have a purpose. And that purpose is dictated to us by our philosophy. Some are unaware of their philosophy, whilst others are aware of their philosophy. And today, media conditions us to think in a certain way, to act in a certain way. We have to look at who are the filmmakers, who are the media makers, what are their agendas, the media that we consume, etc. And we have to try to be balanced, try to come to the middle, And that leads me to the, I believe, fifth point, which likewise is dependent upon our conditioning, and that is assumptions and expectations. Assumptions and expectations. If you leave today with only 2 words from this, what I'm saying, take these 2 words: assumptions and expectations. Negative assumptions and unrealistic expectations. For example, a common one, a man may assume that his wife doesn't love him. Everything she does now is going to be viewed through the prism that my wife doesn't love me. A man may develop the assumption, my wife has feminist tendencies. Everything that his wife now does is going to be viewed through the prism of what? My wife is a feminist. So she may bring valid issues. He'll just say, you're just listening to those feminists. The man may bring valid issues. The wife says, you're just listening, you're a misogynist. You're listening to too much YouTube and so on and so forth. Rather than actually trying to understand what the person is saying. Trying to understand. And that's a key part of communication. Communication has more to do with listening than it does speaking. You have to actually listen and understand what they're saying, not listen and think of what you're going to say in response to what they're saying. Another one, expectations. So you have assumptions and expectations. The man expects when he comes home from work, the wife is looking after the kids, but he expects an immaculately clean home and a meal prepared and cooked ready for him on the table, and the wife looks amazing as well. Is that attainable? The woman expects the man to work 5 days a week, pay all of the bills, provide, look after her and the kids financially, but also when he comes home from work, clean. Is that reasonable? We have to think about our expectations, because if our expectations are unreasonable on either side, we're setting ourselves up to be disappointed. And we're setting the other person up for failure. So a common one, women will say, the Prophet ﷺ used to clean in the house and used to sew his own clothes. It's a common example. The other example, Aisha anha, she said that there was barely a fire in the home, meaning there was barely any cooked food. So either way you look at it, you can find examples in the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. We don't look for extreme examples, or the non-general examples, etc. We have to try to find a balanced approach. What was the balanced approach? I.e., what was the overall practice of the Prophet ﷺ? Not individual practices or individual statements. If I want a healthy marriage, I have to be reasonable in my expectations. If I come from a working class background and my husband comes from a working class background, is it reasonable to expect that he's now going to take me on a holiday every season, and he's going to buy me the latest fashion items and so on? Is that reasonable? Is that the way I was living prior to getting married? If not, that's an unreasonable expectation. And there are many from either side, but negative assumptions and unreasonable expectations destroy marriages. Not only do they destroy marriages, but they destroy individuals. If you are negative with yourself and you are unreasonable with yourself, the expectations you have of yourself, you set yourself up for failure. Likewise, your friend, and so on and so forth. And then I will conclude perhaps with the final point that I've put down before moving on to some advice. The final point, and this is one which is relevant to us, like those that are attending and those that live in the UK and in Europe and America, etc. We have to realize that we are all privileged. Every single one of us, we're all privileged. And this is a term that I believe has been misused over the last year or so, where we've heard individuals saying, certain people are privileged and attaching certain ethnicities to the word privilege. But if we really think about it, every single one of us living in the West, we are privileged. And if you don't believe that's the case, go and live outside of the West for a year or so and come back and see how you feel. See how you feel. Because one of the facts of those that live in the West is we are spoiled. We are spoiled. That's not to say everyone is spoiled, but as a people, as a collective, we are spoiled. We find things to complain about that are really, really not even secondary issues. We have food. We have food on the table every day. We complain because it's the same food. We have different types of food. We complain because it's always the same types of different types of food. We have food that's been heated. We complain it's not hot enough. We have food that's been spiced. It's not spicy enough, or it's too spicy. It's too salted or not salted enough. The drink's not cold enough. It's not the ideal temperature, or the drink's too hot. And you find it summarized in the joke: British weather. British people complain if it rains and complain if it's hot. But there's some truth in that from the perspective of us living in the West. We are all privileged. All of us, we are privileged. Why? Because we have access to homes, we have access to water, we have access to food, we have access to facilities to clean ourselves, we have access to clothing. These are things which are considered privileges in many parts of the world. Many parts of the world. Many parts of the world would walk into a second-hand shop in London and say, Alhamdulillah ala hadhihi ni'am. They would say, what privileges these people have if they saw the second-hand clothes that we can buy. That's a reality. Many individuals, if we were to bring them into our homes and turn the taps on and they see flowing water, they would cry if they had such a gift given to them, because they have to walk for a long time to get water which is polluted, not even clean, polluted. We spend money on things that are not necessities, and then we complain about them. Likewise in our marriages. In our marriages, both sides, men and women. You find men that have wives, they say, I'm not attracted to my wife. You have women that have husbands providing for them, caring for them. They say, I'm not interested anymore. this is, I'm sorry to say, the consequence of being spoiled. Being spoiled and being overprivileged. And perhaps in the future, we may really taste the difficulty that other people in this world are tasting and say, Astaghfirullah, for the lack of gratitude that I used to have. So we have a first world sickness, a first world sickness of the heart, which is a lack of gratitude. A lack of gratitude. And I'm sorry to be harsh, but sometimes the reality needs to be painted with a harsh brush. That's a reality that we've come to. And we have to remind ourselves to be grateful. We have to remind ourselves to be grateful. And we have to remind ourselves, Alhamdulillah, what did I feel like before when I was looking for a husband? I was upset that I couldn't find a husband. Now that I have a husband, I'm not happy with him. I was upset before because I couldn't find a wife. I wanted to get married so much. Now I have a good wife. I don't find her attractive anymore. And most of the time, brothers, the man that doesn't find his wife attractive, most of the time it's because he's too busy looking at women that he should not be looking at. And women who are not happy with their husband is because they're comparing their husband to other men or to what they see on a screen, an illusion. It's fake. It's not real. And so if we were to bring ourselves in a little bit and develop some gratitude, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would open our eyes to the blessings that we have. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, وَلَئِن شَكَرْتُمْ لَأَزِيدَنَّكُمْ. If you are grateful, I will increase you. And something, subhanAllah, I was thinking about this verse. When you open your eyes to a blessing, you start to see other blessings behind it. Try it. Think about the eye, sight. Then you can think about the mind, capacity to understand. Then you can think about that which keeps the mind alive. Oxygen, lungs, clean air. So when you think about one ni'mah, your sight to other ni'am opens. You start to see blessings and conceive blessings that you didn't used to take into consideration. And so this problem here, it's a big problem too. So then now I'll quickly go on to how can we alleviate some of these issues. Number one, and this is generally in life, to develop healthy help-seeking habits. Develop healthy help-seeking habits. If I'm in need of help, I should ask. But a healthy help-seeking habit is to ask someone who has the capacity to help. If I am inexperienced and I go to someone just as inexperienced as me and I ask them for help, I'm not actually asking the right person. If I'm broke and I ask another broke man how to get rich, I'm making a mistake. Likewise, if I'm married and I'm asking a man who doesn't have the capacity to understand marriage properly about marriage advice, I'm making a mistake. So healthy help seeking, it's not only about asking for help, but it's asking the right person. And prior to that, seeking Allah's help. Seeking Allah's help. In our marriages, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He tests us in life to bring us back to Him. And some of the earlier generations of Islam, they used to say, I could see the impact of my sin in the way that my spouse treats me. Look at the lens with which they viewed life. Their wife mistreats them or their husband mistreats them. They don't blame the wife or the husband, they blame themselves. And they blame their relationship with Allah and they turn back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Seeing our problems as being triggered by sin. We are unfortunately living in a very materialistic society where everything has to have a material cause. But there are non-material causes, metaphysical causes, such as sin. Sin can cause calamity. If I am sinning, then I should expect problems in my life. It doesn't mean that I should develop, what's the word? An obsessive kind of, looking at every area of my life constantly. No, but we're all aware of ourselves. We're all aware of ourselves. We know when the sins that we do, we are aware of them. If I'm watching things I shouldn't be watching, if I'm listening to things that I shouldn't be listening to, if I'm speaking about people in a way that I shouldn't be speaking about them, then I'm kama tudin tudan. As you treat others, you will be treated. And so reflecting on ourselves. The earlier scholars and awliya of Islam, they said, we used to work on ourselves in private so that when we meet in public, we present the best of ourselves to others. A marriage is no different. A marriage is no different. When the Prophet ﷺ said that marriage is half of your deen because it teaches you more about yourself than anything else in this life can possibly teach you. And the next advice is to be, there are two words that start in the same way, self. You have selfish and you have selfless. And our deen is a deen of selflessness, not selfishness. But we are living in a society that promotes selfishness over selflessness. We are taught to sacrifice others for the sake of our own personal gain. Capitalism is to earn money at the cost of another. That's capitalism. And so we can very easily adopt this as a philosophy in life. And so rather than think about how I can serve my husband, how I can serve my wife, I think about how they should be serving me. And if you have a man who thinks how his wife should be serving him, and a woman who thinks how her man should be serving her, you're going to have two people going in the opposite direction. But if you have a man who thinks, how can I serve my wife? And a woman who thinks, how can I serve my man? You're going to have two people coming together. So if we simply concern ourselves with being in service of the other, both parties will be happy. But if we consider how the other should be serving us, then we're going to both be going in opposite directions. And so we have to work on being selfless and not selfish. Self-sacrifice is a part of marriage. It's a part of marriage. The man sacrifices a part of himself for his wife and his kids. The woman sacrifices a part of herself for her husband, and her kids. You have to be careful these days. For her husband and her kids. And that's how it should be. But if I see the other person as sacrifice for myself, and they see me as sacrifice for themselves, the marriage is not going to end well. So I conclude with that, inshallah. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد.